What's the worst thing you've accidentally overheard? Please like, subscribe and comment so I can create more videos for you. I want out of this marriage. Didn't enjoy hearing my parents split up in the next room when I was a kid. I hear ya, my parents used to whisper from their bedroom next door to mine and I heard all their talk of I never loved you and all that crap. I heard my ex having a business call in his office that sounded a lot like cheating. To be fair, the line can be pretty blurry when it comes to being a farmer rep. I was home alone as a 12-year-old and my dad's friend called the house. I let it go to voicemail and he left a bizarre voicemail about my dad being the best friend he'd ever had. My dad came home 10 minutes later and I told him about the voicemail. Dad tried to call him and he didn't pick up. It turned out he shot himself immediately after leaving the voicemail, which was a pretty big mental time bomb for me. We don't need to care about him since he's adopted. I was made a 10 vacationing with some family friends at a local summer resort. The family was trying forever to have a baby and after 10-something years decided to adopt a toddler. A year later the woman got pregnant, ended up having 2 more bio kids, and still loved her adopted still the same. The husband however became indifferent to their adopted and spoiled the bio baby rotten and took pleasure in making sure the adopted knows this. He made a lot of jokes of returning the kid since he is not blood related anyways and other comments that were hurtful and out of line. Soon cousins of the kid started to taunt this poor 4-year-old who was confused of why he was being teased. Mind you, this happened in a 1-day span too. Mom tried to shield him as much as she can and the husband made a serious faux pas of making that comment in front of 10 other people from church too. He tried to backpedal fast but not before my scary mother, the leader of the friend group, ripped him a new one. He never joined us anymore in gatherings and eventually the whole family moved to another town months later. I heard half of a phone conversation. A man said into his phone, "I ain't doing this shit. There wasn't supposed to be no security guard here." Overheard by me, the security guard. In a bank that had recently been robbed. In what world do banks not have security guards? Edit, my world, apparently. Had a co-worker plot with her husband to falsely accuse her ex of child abuse. She wanted full custody. She ended up with 1 supervised visit per month. I wonder who spilled the beans? Listening to my parents argue about my father's internet history having porn in it, followed up with them arguing about their declining sex life, was pretty rough on me when I was 12. The worst. I was visiting my aunt and uncle and we were watching some show where the wife commented on the frequency of her and her husband's intimacy when my uncle told my aunt, "Wow, if you touched me about half as much as that woman touched her husband we wouldn't be having these issues." And my aunt just looked so sad, man. I was like 14. They divorced shortly afterwards. Standing in line waiting for my Tim Hortons coffee. The girl in front of me was talking with her friend. "Yeah, so I caught HIV from this dude. It's okay though, it's not like I'm going to die right away. I want some of her positivity." I hope that last line was an intentional pun. If not, you've got some legendary oversight. I'd been on holiday for about a month, on the other side of the world to my family. I had FaceTimed my mum and told her what I was up to, found out what was going on back home. Just normal conversation. Eventually we said bye and mum ended the call, or so she thought. She'd just paused it so the audio was still coming through. I heard my little sister ask her, "Are you crying?" and mum said, "Not now." I quickly hung up. I think she missed me and didn't want me to know she was sad. Waiting to Skype call my long distance girlfriend and before the video comes on the audio peaks up, heard her roommate yell to her, "You gonna dump that sorry little boy now?" Yeah, she immediately turned off the feed and broke up with me over Skype text instead. Nice. Sorry bro. But it sounds like you are better off without her. It'll get better, promise. It was when I was a kid and it was just my single mom and I living in a house together. She had late stage ovarian cancer that was getting worse. One afternoon she told me she was tired and needed to go lay down in her room. Totally common. with her condition, so nothing struck me as odd. I went to her room with a glass of water to put by her bed for when she woke up, but right as about to turn the knob to get into her room, I was thrown off guard when I heard her voice, and it sounded like she was incredibly emotional and sad. There was no phone in her room, and I knew nobody was over at our house visiting. It took me a minute of eavesdropping to realize that she was using a tape recorder to record her last goodbyes to me for after she died. She died 2 weeks later. I found the tape. This was years ago, and I still haven't been able to get myself to listen to it. The memory of being there while she was recording it, and the memory of my naive adolescent self finally realizing that my mom was about to die is just too overwhelming for me still. But I'm glad to know that one day when I'm ready, I will have a recording of her voice to listen to. As a nerd, I feel an obligation to recommend that you have a backup made. If you're not ready to listen to it, that's fine, but tape can degrade. It would suck on a cosmic level to be ready to listen and discover that you can't because the media didn't hold up. I don't know if this counts as overheard or not, but I guess this kind of counts. One night back in 2005, I was getting ready for bed when my phone rang. "Hi, are you the wrong bucket potato?" "Yes." Dart. I responded. "I hate to ask this, but my daughter had a son a long time ago and gave him away. I've been looking for him since he was born. Do you know who all of your grandparents are? Were you adopted?" Unfortunately for her, I knew my whole biological family. I recounted my family history and how I couldn't possibly be her wrong bucket potato. She asked me a few times if I was sure, absolutely sure, but I had to specify that I was. Then she asked me a bit about myself, what I did in school and what I did for a living. I think she was trying to imagine what her lost grandson, who just happened to share my name, might be like. I hope that poor lady found her grandson. Do you know your mother's maiden name? What street did you grow up on? What was your first pet's name? What's the make of the first car you owned? Man, a lot of people think I'm their grandson. After speaking with my grandpa on the phone before he properly hung up, I heard him commenting to my uncle how ungrateful I was. I had at that point visited every week for a year and cleaned his entire bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, hallway and living room every single goddamned week. Usually bringing some food or dessert with me. I moved out of town shortly after this. Sounds a lot like my dad. Once I heard him on the phone with my older half-sister. She is currently living in a shelter with her 4 kids. He kept saying she should visit and he will send her money and gifts. A bunch of empty promises. The minute he got off the phone with her, he started calling her an idiot for getting pregnant and not keeping her legs closed. I'm glad she never heard the things he says about her, because she looks up to him and is always looking for him. She didn't grow up with, so she doesn't know how he really is. My family and I were at a restaurant and there was a father and his daughter, we'll call D, for daughter, sitting in the booth right across the aisle from us. D looked to be no more than 20 years old. She talks the whole time about her ex, Chris. Apparently, Chris was married and Dee did not give two shits. She said it was the wife's fault for not being good enough to keep her husband faithful. Welp, Chris was still sleeping with his wife because she got pregnant. When Dee found out wife was pregnant, Dee told Chris he had to choose between her and his wife. At first, Chris chose Dee, then he found out his unborn child had congenital heart defects. So, he called off the divorce, broke up with Dee, and moved back in with his wife. Dee sits there in silence looking slightly bewildered before saying, I don't know why he chose her and the retard baby. So what if it dies? They can always make another one. But that's not the worst part. Her dad breaks his silence and asks, so, your mom and Chris aren't getting divorced? Your mom and Chris? Your mom? This batshit crazy bitch was having a blatant affair with her much older stepfather, made him choose between her and her pregnant mother, and then made sociopathic comments about her unborn brother. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes everyone. I would like to clarify a few things. This conversation took place at a Mimi's cafe in the East Valley of the Phoenix, Arizona metro area. She was 100% white trash from head to toe. My family seriously were expecting a camera crew for a prank type TV show to show up. It's hard to fathom someone that demonic truly does walk amongst us. Also, I'm not positive the man she was dining with was her father. He looked old enough and they had similar facial features. You poisoned my ovaries, you Jew crazy woman, to her friend while they were arguing. Two of my best friends in high school had a conference call about me. I just happened to be with the third friend they called and overheard how they thought I was annoying and I'm only friends with this other person for popularity. Stopped being friends with them shortly after this. I was 14 years old and it was the end of 8th grade. I fucking hated middle school and was picked on mercilessly. As the end of the year celebration we went to one of those putt-putt driving range batting cage places and my older brother came and visited for lunch. He was like 19 and home from college and it was really sweet of him to do. I also have to note that objectively my brother is very attractive. At the time he was a college swimmer so he was in really good shape, and all my friends were gaga about him. When I was in line to get some more food I heard these two bitchy girls in front of me go, how does she have such a hot brother when she turned out so bad? Oof. My poor fragile 14-year-old self-esteem. I pretended I hadn't heard them, left the line, and managed not to burst into tears. Teenage girls can be so cruel. Not that much of an accident, but my mom caught my dad having an affair and I overheard her as she was yelling at the top of her lungs while my dad was sobbing begging her to take him back. Never looked at my dad the same way after that. Edit. Just for some more background, I was 16 when this happened, and I'm now 34. My parents are still together. No, I wouldn't ever date that kid. He is ugh. Lie. A crush of mine in middle school describing why she wouldn't ever go out with me while she didn't know I was walking a few people behind her in the hall. It got a good laugh from everyone else but middle school me did not like that moment very much. Lol. Also, probably not the worst thing I have ever heard but it's all I can remember right now. I overheard my long-term boyfriend's mom talking negatively about me multiple times when she didn't think I was around. We have been dating a long time and I try to be as thoughtful as possible. It is what it is, I guess. I can't make her like me or change the way she is. My ex's stepmom broke up our long-term relationship and both of her sons' marriages. Some women just can't handle there being other women in their boys' lives. Brought this up in another thread like a month ago. On my first day of college while waiting online at the bookstore, I know you should never buy books at the college lol. Two girls were behind me on the line talking about a cute guy in front of them on the line. I naturally took this to think it was me and it raised my ego quite a bit. Until one of them tapped me on the shoulder and asking me to get the attention of the guy just ahead of me online. Was bartending. On our busiest day, people were waiting everywhere even outside. Family is a little loud and rowdy. A kid about 8 can't be still. Him and a guy seems to be about late 20s are wrestling and acting up. Kid is yelling no and screaming. People are kind of used to them at this point. Suddenly the guy starts yelling I am gonna grab your penis. And says it a few times. Kid is yelling no. The entire restaurant got dead silent and everyone was jaw-dropped staring. Finally, after a bit too long, the mother is like WTF, can't say that or act like that, and they all go outside. So guy at work was on his cell phone. He starts getting louder and louder. Eventually he is basically yelling into his phone. He was on the phone with his wife verbally abusing her and yelling about how bad he was going to beat her when he got home. Security was called. He was fired and the police were contacted about the potential abuse. Was this in Sierra Vista, AZ? Word for word it's the same story of something that happened at my old job. When I worked at Waffle House, the location I worked at was part of the prison work release program. Our grill guy was a convict in for burglary and a few other charges. I'd say he worked there for maybe 6-8 months. Over the course of that 6-8 months he became romantically involved with a customer. Also, behind her back, he was going up to the motel behind us for some steamy times with a few other servers. He was stringing a whole bunch of girls along. The girl who was his girlfriend wouldn't believe anything bad about him. She was a very young, sweet, naive girl and I felt bad for her tbh. Me and my fellow older seen it all lady servers tried to tell her. But she wouldn't listen. Anyway, one night the girlfriend was there, and the two of them were in the stockroom doing whatever it was they did in there. I was on my way out the back door to throw some trash in the dumpster and I heard her say, "You mean just leave?" So I started to listen. He's trying to talk her into hopping in her van, grabbing her 2-year-old and taking off to Alabama with him. Troubled, I headed out front to mull over what I should do. Deep down I thought surely she's not that stupid. We got slammed right after this and one of the other complicit servers filled in for him on the grill so he could spend time with her in the closet. I had no time to think about what to do after that. I didn't realize they'd actually done it until the CO that came to pick him up was there, asking where he was. Everyone had disappeared at that point, knowing what was coming, leaving me to be the one to have to tell the guy he escaped. And I was pissed. Beyond pissed. I just stood there, jaw clenched, staring at the prison guard angrily. He knew what I was about to say before I even said it. Fuck me, they took off, and I knew what was coming after that. I knew the fucking news would be there. I knew I was going to be questioned. Oh my god, I was so incredibly mad I could have turned into the Sunday. I was mad at them too. Him for being such an incredible dumbass doing this when he only had 3 months left on his sentence. Her for being so stupid as to torpedo her life and get her kid taken away. I liked both of them somewhat. Pair of fucking dumbasses. So I got questioned, and avoided being put on TV. Thank God, and the manhunt ensued. All the second shift servers but me got fired or sent to other stores after it was found out what they'd all been doing. Some other things came out about them too, so it wasn't just for the escape incident. As to the pair of dumbasses, she was found about a week later in Alabama, alone in a park, because he'd abandoned her. Then a few days later he was found at his dad's house. Got 6 more years added to his sentence. She got her kid taken, lost her job and 2 years in prison, which she only had to serve about 6 months of. Stupid. Everybody in this story was stupid, including me. This is so sad. I know she made a poor choice but I feel terrible reading this. How doesn't parolee get so much play? I'm gainfully employed, make a pretty damn good living and I can't get shit. Semicolon comma. Once I was waiting for the elevator in my building and a guy came out of his apartment and screamed into his phone the following quote. Ahem. I could suck your dick and I still wouldn't be gay. We both looked at each other in shock as he receded into his home. On a flight got once I listened for 2 hours to the old men behind me talk about their recent sexual exploits in Thailand. It was disgusting. A guy had a similar experience on the plane from Neg to the Dominican Republic. 2 younger, 20s, guys strategizing. One giving the other advice about timing, when to make your move, etc. No idea on the topic at the time. 3 days later I see these guys at the local dance club, which as it turned out, functioned as a brothel. So yeah, I'm not sure why strategy was necessary in this case. Once on a train ride home, I overheard a young woman's phone conversation about becoming a prostitute and trying to find a pimp in graphic detail, including accepting that she would occasionally get the shit beat out of her. It was horrific AF. We had this class in high school that was out of campus, so a school bus had to take us. The bus would drop us off and stay there parked until the class ended and the bus driver would drive us back. Class was an hour long. Bus driver waited inside the bus with the ignition off. It was finals for that class but I had finished it a day earlier than everyone, so I decided to stay on the bus and fall asleep. Bus driver proceeds to have the most explicit and dirty conversation with his wife on the phone. Stuff like I am gonna tie you up, whip you and fuck you type stuff. Mind you, this class was at 8 AM. How horny do you have to be to have these conversations at 8 AM? LMAO. He was oblivious that I was on the bus since I was close to the back. He eventually realized later during the drive back that I never got off the bus since he never saw me get back on, but I was there somehow. He gave me a stare of pure shame on the rear view mirror. It was hilarious and weird. I was in my garage one night a few years back when I overheard my teenage neighbor on the phone trying to convince his girlfriend to get an abortion. Was eating at a Joe's Crab Shack several years ago. Our server was a younger black guy. So we're all done eating. Restaurant is fairly empty. All of a sudden we hear him clear as day in the kitchen. What? I will knock your motherfucking head off. Then we see him walk out of the kitchen with a manager. He goes outside for a few minutes to cool off presumably. A short time later he comes out with the desserts a couple people at our table ordered and says, all cheery, so, who had the cheesecake? It was so weird. I'm imagining Craig from Parks and Rec screaming in the wine room when he's trying out to be Tom Sommelier. I was visiting my brother from out of state. Eater, I'm female. We went to the store. He dropped me off at his college apartment, and then he and my dad went to run a different errand. My brother's landline phone rang. I went to answer it, but it went straight to his answering machine. This was a while ago, 1999. The message was a male voice saying, hey, I saw you just a little while ago with a kind of ugly girl. Eater equals edited to at. Your frustration at trying to figure out how this made sense in the above sentence is me, a 40+ person, trying to understand some of the pop culture references you gosh darn kids throw around. Oh no, this reminds me of a similar thing. I'm 6 feet 4 inches and female. My freshman year of college, I heard someone say to his normal-sized girlfriend, after passing me, I'm sorry, but girls that are taller than me really freak me out. I went back to my dorm room and cried. I was 14 and I overheard my mother talking with a doctor about my younger sister's cancer treatment. I had no idea she had cancer. She had no idea she had cancer. As soon as she got off the phone I asked her what was going on. She burst into tears. I burst into tears. My little sister was 8 at the time and had been ill for months, so I helped my parents talk to her. It was very upsetting. We shortly after took her to a clinic 500 miles away, spent a week there, no cancer, no leukemia, misdiagnosed, she had an abscess that caused her symptoms. Easily treated, but I'll never forget hearing the phone call. Wow. That had to be stressful, but I'm really glad your sister wound up being misdiagnosed. I hope she's doing well. When I was 12 I overheard my stepdad saying to my mum how much better their life would be without me there and how awful I am and how he wishes I wasn't there. My mum just agreed. I wasn't even a bad kid, did well in school, never got in trouble, I could be a stroppy teenager. He was an awful manipulative violent misogynist and I wish he wasn't here. My mother once pocket dialed me and I overheard her and my stepfather talking about the house I was living in. I was living in her house which I had an agreement with her that I would pay the mortgage and all the bills and when it was paid off, she would sign it over to me. This wasn't anything spectacular, the house was in dire need of major repair and she hadn't lived there 4 years anyway. Also, we had found out that she hadn't been paying the mortgage for over a year even though I'd been giving her money for it since I was 17. Well, my wife and I had offered her $10K for the house. It had $3K left on the mortgage and was about to be foreclosed on, just to try and get her to live up to her side of the bargain we had reached years before. So I heard stepdad ask what she's going to do about the house. She said I don't know. Stepdad reminded her that we offered more than was owed. Her exact words were I'll give it to his sister before I sell it to him. So we found a different house. And his sister was given that one. She dumped $40K worth of repairs and sold it for $100K. Edit, added a K. I guess it wasn't so much an accident as it was an inevitability, but as I was entering my dorm one day freshman year of college, a girl who was sitting in the courtyard shouted to her friend who was right behind me, the doctor says nothing is wrong with me, I just have an abnormal nipple. Can't blame her if she thought it was cancer. I'd probably be like I don't have ball cancer. It's just a swollen vein woo before being like oh right, TMI. When I was 7 we had 2 house phones in different parts of the house. I heard the phone ring one time and my parents were both holed up in my dad's office and picked up the phone, which I thought was weird. I picked up the other phone to satiate my curiosity, only to hear some lady screaming at my mom about how bad my dad was in bed and she doesn't care about him anyway. Just wanted to get ahead at work. Was a lot to swallow at the time and an awkward afternoon. I was on a cruise and reading a book in one of the lounges. This very upset woman sat sort of behind me, and her husband was with her. She was crying because their vet had some bad news about their dog, and she was trying to call the vet. She told the husband after she got off the phone that she needed 15 minutes to listen to a song by herself and collect her thoughts. He asked if he could get her anything and she said no, she just wanted to be alone for a minute. Once he left, she called her boyfriend and started giving him grief about girls liking his pictures on Instagram and how jealous she was, and was making plans to sneak off to call him later. Scumbag. Hearing my cat vomiting, but no fucking idea where she and the vomit is located. I was on a coach bus traveling to another state and I woke up to someone whispering, "Hey, remember what we said earlier?" I thought they were about to argue again since they were going back and forth about something earlier, only to hear muffled sucking noises. At first I was like, what? Then was like, oh. I was around 8 or 9 years old. It was early morning around Christmas time. I was laying in bed and I could hear my mom talking to somebody on the phone downstairs. She was talking loud enough for me to hear every word she was saying, and she ended up confirming my suspicions. Santa was not real. She said something along the lines of, "If you Jurassic things wants to still believe in him, then I will let him." Later that day I was snooping around the Christmas tree looking at presents and I saw a few gifts for me that were from Santa. This was at least a few days before Christmas, so the secret was out. My mom really dropped the ball that year. And that night Santa appeared and took you on a long heartfelt ride, showing you mother's hard life through moments of past Christmases from toddler to adult, a rare 1980s doll being the catalyst for the death of her love for the magic of Christmas. Then, as you awoke and found that wrapped gift left by Santa, you woke her up with it and her heart melted, resurrecting her love of the holidays. Credits roll. I work in a hospital. I overheard a doctor telling a 1-year-old's parents their child just died. I will never forget the sounds that came out the mother. This crazy lady in a pizza shop was talking to herself, going on about how she hates niggers, Jews, fat people, the list goes on. So I turned around and asked if she was okay. Then I got a "fuck you, fucking ginger." And that was the end of that. It was low-key really funny cause everyone gave me that "I'm sorry" look and then they all silently shamed her. Then she got even more pissed and talked to herself louder. I didn't stay long enough to see if she got kicked out. I hate Ginger's fucking Jew. Oh. Is it okay I use these as jokes? Also, is she Eric Cartman? My mother and father were arguing one night. My mother had a bunch of pill bottles on the kitchen counter. My brother, sister and I woke up because they were so loud. We got out of bed, watched them arguing. Our father said to our mother right in front of us, "Go ahead and kill yourself, but I'm not taking care of these kids." Our mother looked at us and walked past us and went to bed. Our father then yelled at us to go back to bed. Our ages were 8, 6, and 4. On a bus. Guy, yeah, I'm moving in front of World Bar, blah blah. I'm going to pick up so much, blah blah. Yeah, you're probably right. That bitch may have given me AIDS. One time I was in a stall at a gas station bathroom. This guy charges in and says something along the lines of, "I can't wait to come over. I'm pretending this urinal is your face." When I heard my parents fighting about when my dad had to move out. The fight was loud and started getting violent before I broke it up. Also the day I learned my parents were getting divorced. A few months ago in the gym, 3 guys were talking very loudly. I could hear them over my music. The weight room was pretty empty. One was talking about how his girlfriend was such a bitch for not putting out. He detailed all her excuses, then went on to say at least he had his other girlfriend. One of the other ones piped up and said he should just wait until she falls asleep because then she can't do anything about it. They all cackled and he said he'd thought of that before but now he'd have to try it. Completely vile humans. When I was a teenager, our bedroom doors were nothing but shutters with handles. Way too many times did I have to listen to my, still underage at the time, older sister have phone sex while I was trying to sleep. Edit FFS. People, I'm female and she's a bitch. Even if she was hot, I'd still want to throat punch her for trying to get me grounded for eavesdropping when I told her to stfoo at 2 AM, through 2 doors and down a hallway. So after we adopted our baby girl my grandparents came up to visit my mom. I was chatting with them, small talk and whatnot. They were acting uncomfortable, glared at me, snide remark here and there about why did I adopt her. So I go to use the bathroom but it's already in use. While standing by the door waiting this exchange happened. Grandpa, leave it to him to bring that squint into this country. Grandma, my daughter, is worse than that damn his sister pushed out a few years ago. So yay, had to pick up my daughter and leave before not being able to control my behavior and beat the hell out of 2 elderly people. For your information, my daughter is Chinese. My nephew is African American descent. Edit. Oh wow, what taking a day away from the internet will do to an inbox. So a bit more info. I was in a rush to get my kids to their activities yesterday. My grandparents and I have had a strained but reasonably civil relationship before this. My mom, their daughter, never measured up to what they thought would be a good person. Both my sisters and I think we have an awesome mother and more or less follow in her footsteps as far as morals, outlook, etc. This of course meant my sisters and I never really measured up to our cousins, who were great people in our grandparents' eyes. Apparently both my grandparents were stationed in Pearl Harbor, grandpa as a mechanic and grandma as a nurse. Both witnessed the kamikaze, saw friends die around the airport and in hospitals. According to my great-aunts and great-uncles, their brothers and sisters, my grandparents came back with a deep hatred of Asians, not just those responsible for their friends' deaths but all Asians. During my 7th grade year in school my history teacher was a WW2 and Korean War vet. Being a private school we didn't follow the normal curriculum but rather discussed the major intricacies leading up to WW2 and the worldwide aftermath. Basically China and Japan didn't like each other. This has stuck in my mind pretty well after all these years. So for my grandparents to hate all Asians is just SMH. Anyway, to answer a few questions in this edit. That exchange took place in the summer of 2005. My daughter was 1 at the time. She's now 14 and is totally awesome. She also has a younger brother also from China who is also awesome. Yay, I'm lucky as fuck to have them in my life. My grandpa died about 2 years ago, grandma a few months later. Apparently they took me and my little sister, the one with the African American son, out of their will. After listening to them back in 2005 I didn't want their money. We already donate to charities that help Chinese orphans. Any inheritance they would have given us would have gone straight to those charities. My mother still doesn't know I heard this. She has 2 sisters that were beloved by grandpa and grandma. She also has had a multitude of really great aunts and uncles that she lived with more than her parents. Grandpa was physically abusive. Probably PTSD after Pearl Harbor would be my guess. My mom turned out to be a great person despite my grandparents. Hell, she went with my wife and I to China to help with our daughter while we were there finishing up our paperwork. The real kicker in this entire mess. 3 of my 4 grandparents, grandma in this story came here from Germany, grandpa from Ireland were first-generation immigrants from Europe back in the early 1920s. Only my dad's dad has a long-term lineage here in the States. I was furious when I overheard their chat but had to stop myself because I knew being dad from jail would be rough and my daughter needed a dad. We had already started paperwork to adopt our son. Having even a misdemeanor beat the hell out of old people conviction would have stopped that instantly. I can't put up with shit like that. I would have told them to stick it up their old, racist asses and to never expect to see my face again. I heard some parents viciously verbally abusing their kids on a camping trip. Just yelling at them and flat out insulting them. Saying they ruin everything, that they're stupid, etc. It was so loud, it was hardly by accident I heard it. When I was 9 I overheard my mom telling the maid not to tell the kids that we're eating horse meat for dinner. My own version of "and they were roommates" was one guy saying hopefully she just has cancer to another. I don't want to know what they were talking about. One time, on a cruise ship, I heard a mother comforting her child, talking about how grandma and grandpa tried to hurt you, and if they ever come near you again, we'll get them kicked off of this boat. Not the worst, but the dirtiest. Working on a bar one night, just cleaning down my station late at night, I heard one guy say to his friend, "I just love it when my wife shaves her ass hair, it tastes so much better." Classy. Someone describing to their friend how to commit rape and get away with it. I'm glad I kicked him out of my life. I'm glad you got back into drugs. I hope you overdose, cocksucker. I once overheard in a bus a woman explaining to her friend that she didn't like that her new BF 10-year daughter had to live with them because her mom was in hospital, so she had hidden money and valuables in the little girl bag, and was planning to confront her about the theft with BF present and get her kicked out of the house. When that turbulent friend asked where the girl would go once she was kicked out, mom in hospital and all that monster of a woman answered she can sleep under the bridge or work on her back like her SLT of a mother. I don't give a shit. This is my man and she can die for all I care. I swear if that poor kid had been with them I would have brought her home with me. I am no maternal by any way, but some things and people are just nightmarish. NSFW. Outside of a nightclub a drunken couple was splitting up. I can't believe what I've heard tonight. You've had half the blokes in this town up your shitter. You're a mucky slag. I'm leaving you. You're not getting your CDs back. I got 4 other siblings. I thought all of them were from my stepfather until I heard the oldest one say, "I want to meet my real dad someday." I was lied to by my mom. I overheard a girl that I basically fell in love with, talking with her friend like, "He's cute but I think we will just stay friends." I overheard that literally seconds before I was going to invite her on a date. You should have talked to her about it. People will often say those sorts of things to kind of keep from getting hopes up if they are unsure if you like them. I'm brown skinned. Once I was walking in my town and accidentally bumped shoulders with someone. I said sorry, he just sort of grumbled, "Shit skin terrorist semi-NR," under his breath. I just kept walking, but man, that guy was a cunt. Though to be fair, I did quite like the word shit skin. I overheard someone talking crap about their friends in a different language. Twas over a decade ago, but in high school during baseball practice I heard something from one of the seniors roughly along the lines of, "Yeah man, the jar in my car that I keep all my cummers is already half full." I was hanging out with some friends in their dorm my freshman year of college. It started to get late and one of the guys who lived there left to spend the night at his girlfriend's, leaving me, my friend, and a girl he'd just met earlier that day in one of his classes. I offered to head out too and my friend said, "No way man, it's still early," so I stuck around a little longer. We were hanging out, watching TV and playing card games, so at the time I didn't feel like I was being a third wheel. But it got increasingly later and we decided to throw on a movie. My friend then said, "You should just stay and crash on the floor." Being lazy and tired, I gladly accepted and settled in to fall asleep for the movie. The two of them settled on the couch behind me, out of view, and in hindsight, that's when I should have taken it upon myself to volunteer to leave. Cut to halfway through the movie, around 1 or 2 a.m. I start to hear rustling behind me. My friend thought I was asleep and began to make his move on the girl. Only problem is I was wide awake. I was torn. Do I kill the mood and mention that I'm awake and get up and leave? Or do I be a good wingman, pretend to be asleep and let them have their fun? I decided to take one for the team and try my hardest to focus on the movie that was on, during which the situation ramped up and I overheard pretty much all the sounds of him fingering her, squishing, moaning, heavy breathing. You name it, it was happening. Eventually it came to an end and so did the movie. At that point there was no way I was falling asleep, so I just laid there, in the dark, trying to decide if they were asleep and I could sneak out or if they were still awake and me getting up would be super awkward. I'm not sure how much time passed, but eventually the other roommate came back and I used that as the perfect opportunity to have the light from the hallway shine in and wake me up. My friend and his new lady friend also woke up and I said my quick goodbyes and escaped to my own dorm to get an actual bit of sleep. TLDR, I overheard my friend fingering a girl while they thought I was asleep and was too awkward to just get up and leave when it was just starting. Man, her pussy was tight. But not as tight as my cousin's. To random people in a mall. I used to work in an office with mostly women. At one point one of my jobs was scanning large files in the back of the filing room. So many times two or groups of women would come in, not think anyone else was in there and proceed to talk about their sex lives. I was using a high production scanner. That thing is not quiet. Not sure how they didn't know I wasn't back there. Some of the things they would say were vile. Edit, more than a few of the women I worked with were into butt sex. Was in the emergency room for 5 hours with a semi-ruptured appendix. I was out there so long, passing out and coming to. I thought I was going to die. Turns out there was a greyhound that ran over a minivan with a family inside. Everyone but the driver made it out okay. When they finally took me back I heard a doctor say to her, "Woman, mom, I'm sorry. We did everything we could, but your husband didn't make it." That wasn't the part that was bad. It was what happened next. The woman made a sound that struck me to the core. I'll never forget it. It's been almost 20 years ago and it still makes me tear up, thinking about it. The sound elicited so many emotions of anger and disbelief and sadness. There's just something about that sound coming from another human. The wailing, half-sobbing, muttering scream that it was definitely the worst thing I have ever overheard. As my friend and I were waking through a parking lot, leaving a farmer's market, we heard a toddler screaming and shouting, "I want a lollipop. I want a lollipop," over and over. The very stressed out looking mother snapped back at him with not only, "You're never getting a lollipop, ever," but follows that up with, "You're an embarrassment. Not even you're embarrassing me, just you're an embarrassment." My friend and I held our lips really tight until we got to our car. If she's stressed and her child is just having a full-out temper tantrum, yeah, that's going to be the response. Maybe a bit harsh, but kids will make you say some crazy things. A girl in math class talking to her friend about having sex with a girl. Talked about taking it slow and then they talked about fingering. All that happened, then I looked up, they were looking at me and to see if I had a boner. I didn't, so they said maybe I'm into butt stuff. The two girls were hot, but fuck, that went from 0 to the speed of light. My mom and stepdad going through a rough patch about 17 years ago after he found out he was going to lose his job. He got pretty down and stopped wanting to do anything outside the house. Unfortunately, part of that was getting snippy with my mom about money. It all came to a head after a month or so and I heard them argue about finances, their relationship and talking about possible divorce. I was already having problems of my own because of the pressure of college classes and 40+ hour full-time work on top of doing all the stuff around the house that my stepdad didn't want to help with. I about had a nervous breakdown and in the most pissed off, frustrated tone, looked at them both and said, "Why can't you fucking talk like fucking adults instead of arguing like fucking children?" They got the hint. We all sat down and had a family heart-to-heart. They eventually went to counseling and stepdad got a new job. They'll be celebrating 25 years together next year. It's amazing how people can turn their attitudes around when they realize that their bullshit isn't just affecting them, but everyone else too. I had my son and about 2 months after he was born I was called a lazy mother by my own mother. A couple months later she was on the phone with one of her friends claiming I abused my son because I let him cry a bit longer than she deemed necessary. I was outside her door at 2 a.m. to bring him back to bed. I was 21 and was shell-shocked with being a mom so suddenly. Didn't find out I was pregnant until I was almost 5 months along. I was rushed into a lot of things. My mom was similar. She actually cursed me out worse than a dog because I had a colicky baby with stranger anxiety. My aunt was offering to hold the baby, but I knew it would make her stressed on top of being colicky, so I said no, I'd rather you get me the bottle instead, which my aunt was fine with. But my mom decided the best course of action would be to curse me out and threaten to throw me and the baby out on the street because I was stupid and lazy. My aunt had to tell her to lay off of me, and that aunt is considered the mean one of the family. My landlord sometimes comes into my apartment without notice, for reasons I do not know. I've caught it on tape. There's not much to be done about it apparently. The acoustics of the hallway are such that if people are talking in a normal voice out there, you can clearly hear their conversation from inside the apartment. I've been laid off of work for 9 months now, so I've not plated my car and instead rode my bike around, and the car just sits there. Granted, I am home most of the time, but my car is no indication. I suffer from bipolar disorder, OCD and a lot of anxiety. So I've got a bunch of self-affirming quotes pinned up on my wall. You don't wanna hurt yourself. You don't hate your life, you hate the way you feel sometimes. You are a good person. Just stop and breathe. Act. This all seems random. Let me put it together. A couple of months ago, someone was viewing the place across the hall from me and the landlord was talking with him. I heard her make comments about how I never leave the house or have people over because I am so mentally ill. She had obviously seen my quote wall, probably my prescriptions on the counter too. She specifically made a comment to the effect of, I have a feeling that one might off himself and leave me with a huge mess to clean up. How I was weak, unwilling to try, act. How she's so strong because she was depressed for a couple weeks before. She went for a walk every day and started feeling great. If I would leave the apartment once in a while, I wouldn't have these problems. She went on about how I don't work and I'm probably on welfare to pay rent. Spewed a bunch about how welfare should change so lazy people like me are forced to take charge of their lives. Like 5 full minutes of making the worst possible assumptions about me with no real info, insulting me, and airing my secrets to this stranger who she's known 10 minutes. Frankly, to everyone on this floor who was at home and paying any type of attention to the talk from the hallway. I also learned from that conversation that the child of the young lady down the hall from me is a fatherless bastard. Her boyfriend beat her and is in jail now, and she's trying to raise the kid on her own. While she was talking about me, I really wanted to open my door and say something. She was 2 feet away on the other side. I had no idea what to say though, and quite frankly all the things she had said had upset me to the point that I didn't trust myself to conduct myself in the best manner. A couple of minutes after she quit talking about me and started talking about the lady down the hall, I just backed away from my door 10 feet, pretended I was talking on a phone and loudly said, "You wouldn't believe how loud the hallway can get. You should hear this fat cunt landlord and the way she talks about people." Then I very quickly summed up what she said about me, then pretended to change topic and move back deeper into my apartment. Once they heard me start talking, they stopped, and I'm sure she heard me. I guess on the plus side, I got to rightfully call my landlord a cunt to her face without any repercussions. We should just kill all the skinny sluts so only big beauties are left. I once was at the mall walking ahead of a large mother and daughter. I overheard them talking about how disgusting I was, and how I was probably anorexic. It was infuriating. You know that school in Asheville, Oklahoma, where the transgender kid is getting shit on because she just happens to live in the center of redneckery? I live 5 miles from that town, in a slightly larger center of redneckery. I was at the bar at Applebee's, only place to get a beer and food after work, don't judge, and the people across from me were talking about it. Apparently they didn't want their Christian kids to go to school with an it from the devil. The thing also was special enough to use the teacher's restroom. I sometimes get culture shock in my own hometown. I can't wait to move and never look back. I would want to leave too if the only place open after work was an Applebee's. I left home at 18, because I lived in a toxic household with conservative Christianity as the excuse and mental illness as the aggravator. It should come to no surprise, but over the phone, I heard my mother telling my youngest sister that she hoped she became nothing like me. This hurt for 2 reasons. My sister is extremely like me, and to know that she is going through exactly what I went through, or worse in a bid to stop her from becoming like me, hurts. I left that home with so many issues, and I know that not only her, but my other siblings will eventually leave with a set of their own. I'm trying to talk to them frequently enough and alleviate the poison my mom is pouring into their minds, but my youngest sister is already depressed and much more. It's difficult, because they are homeschooled, so they only have me and other family members. They are totally isolated, as I was, and surrounded with religious propaganda. The reason for my mom to love me in her own way, love me when convenient to tout her good deeds to her church and pyramid scheme groupies, is because I'm queer, living with my same-sex significant other, outside the bounds of marriage. Forget that I am successful. I'm currently pursuing 2 degrees to further my success in my adult life, and am combating my own laundry list of mental health issues and disabilities. Forget that I succeeded past everything she set me up against. I am queer, and that is a sin. Despite all of my accomplishments and the work I have put in to make sure that I can help my siblings escape when their time comes, and on some level, make her proud, none of it matters, because I am queer. I don't know you beyond what you just wrote, but as a father myself, I'd be proud of as fuck if you were my child. I heard a woman talking on the phone on the train saying I really enjoyed out night, just sorry you didn't come on my ass. I was instantly in love. I was on a bus trying to listen to music. This girl sat beside me and was talking so loud I could hear it over my headphones. She said, yeah, I'm working real hard to get my daughter back. I've been clean for over a year. Pause. Ecstasy. Doesn't count. I'm sorry for that girl's daughter. Past 2 people on the street. Oh, I have the most amazing story to tell you. I was in a hurry, so I had to keep walking away, without hearing what was about to be told. Guy, laughing. My hand slipped and the bookshelf fell on her. She shouldn't have been standing there. Not the worst, but definitely a head-shaking moment. I was at the DC Zoo with me little girl visiting the gorilla exhibit, when a small boy 10-11 years old turns to his mother and asks, "Mom, it says that we've evolved from primates, is this true?" Which point his mother scolds him and says, "Don't read that filth. All humans have descended from Christ, not primates. Start reading your Bible and stop reading your science book." I was genuinely stuck in awe for a few minutes as I felt a bit sorry for the small boy. I overheard an old man talking about how women at his retirement home would give him blowjobs for rides to the supermarket or doctor's appointments. He was bragging about how he got so much action because they couldn't drive. I almost turned around and knocked his head off his body.